You wrote an article, or at least were cited in an article for the Chicago Tribune titled Three Misconceptions About Remote Work and How to Manage Them in February of last year. And those three misconceptions were: productivity does not equal hours worked, access does not equal connection, and less commute time does not equal more sleep. And I'd love if you could break each of those down for us and give a little bit more context on each of those pillars, and anything else that feels worth mentioning around remote work as well, because a huge amount of people listening to this are working remotely.
Productivity is no longer outside of the factory working and industrial context. It's not about widgets. We're not making widgets. It's not about numbers in, numbers out. As in, if I put 5 more hours into a factory, then I'm going to get, it will linearly increase with the amount of work product and work outcome. Welcome to knowledge work, guys. Knowledge work is not like that. You will have an aha moment in the shower on a Saturday night, and that could set the entire direction and strategy for your company and for your team. You did not plan that, and that aha moment could have been after months of not coming up with any good ideas, banging your head against a wall, trying to solve a problem, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, at being on vacation on a Saturday, let's say, you're going to have this aha moment just naked in the shower. The point I'm making here is that there is no longer a linear relationship between number of hours put in and the outcomes that we're getting out of those hours. So we have what we call a non-linear relationship with productivity now as knowledge workers. Having said that, I think it's of utmost importance for companies and teams to now understand this and acknowledge it up front, that we don't want to promote what we call presenteeism. Presenteeism being showing up for the sake of showing up. You invite me to a 3-hour meeting and I just say, okie dokie, and I accept the invite, even though I totally don't need to be there. If I actually looked carefully at the agenda that you hopefully sent out in advance, if I look at the agenda, I'm not really taking lead on any one of these. I'm not an active participant in this meeting, let's say, for example, but I'm going to show up anyway. So I just took 3 hours of my precious time and I dumped it into a meeting that I didn't need to be in, for example. Right? We want to make sure that the people that are working with us on our teams, the people that are working in our companies, we ourselves are respecting our brains, respecting our own work enough so that we feel the confidence, the autonomy to be able to say, that is not a good use of my time and I'm going to opt out of that. You know what is a good use of my time? Blocking off an hour and getting this important piece of work done. And I'm going to do that during my peak biological time, my peak performance window based on my chronotype, because I know that I will get my work done 5 times faster during, for example, let's say 9 to 11 a.m. than if I were to wait and punt this to the afternoon. Because come 2, 3 o'clock, I am just feeling brain dead every single day. And I let my entire morning be littered with meetings, for example. So I think the big ask here, I have this saying that I've been sort of pushing recently, and that is that we are better than life's default settings. We're better than our digital devices default settings, like just in general. I am better than the default settings. And I just really want people to acknowledge that, embrace that as a lifestyle, especially as it relates to how we work together. Because the default settings are not there to help us, that they're just the default. You need to go in and customize it because we're better than that. It's important for us to, yes, communicate and be accessible to our teams, especially if you are a people leader, if you're a manager, or if you are a domain expert and people will come to you with questions. You don't want to be the blocker on the team where someone is waiting for you to be unblocked, for example. However, there is a world of difference between being accessible and being constantly connected. And being constantly connected, especially within the context of remote or hybrid work, is one of the biggest mistakes that we can possibly make. There's biological reasons why humans are compelled to make those mistakes, though, in the first place, and that is that humans are very, very social creatures. We're actually the most social species on the face of the planet. We are so deeply tied to one another. We care so deeply about one another and what everybody thinks, and being accessible and being available and not seeming like we're MIA or letting somebody down, that we will overcorrect and we will be accessible and available all day, every day. I'm not suggesting we go dark and then you just say like, oh, there's all these walls up and you'll never get a hold of me. No, of course not. Of course not. However, the key here is to develop what we call a communication escalation path. Communication escalation path could be literally as simple as saying, hey, guess what? Email me if you need something in the next day or so, if it's non-urgent. If you need something in the next 2 to 3 hours, please send me a chat message of some sort, because I'm going to check that more often. If it's an absolute fire, like drop everything you're doing emergency, please pick up the phone and call me. Why is somebody sending you a digital letter when there's an emergency? Like, pick up the phone. If the house is on fire, don't like send me an email about it. Like, call me. Like, there's got to be an escalation, like a way that we're communicating in a way that makes sense and is efficient.
I'd love your thoughts, Sahar, on what you're seeing with the clients you work with around the commute times that is being saved is getting reallocated toward generally, and how people can make sure that it gets reallocated effectively.
The data early on in the pandemic, and this came out of Microsoft actually, earlier than it did most other research teams and research groups, that time, the commute time, 100% went towards chat. I was on multiple talk shows and podcasts. We were talking about this research a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I was one of those voices saying, guys, everybody, hold on, let's take a breath here. It's a pandemic. People are stuck inside. There's nothing for them to do. I get that they're not making healthy choices. I can see, and it's much to my chagrin, that people aren't sleeping or maybe exercising at home or just meditating or doing things that bring them joy and comfort during those off hours. But it's a weird time right now. Give folks a little bit of time to just sink into this, and we might see the data kind of shift. No, unfortunately, I was wrong. We did not see the data shift. People are still using the time in the early mornings and late evenings and on weekends to catch up on work. And I think the culprit is honestly that there's no work day. I push the finger back, and I'm not blaming the people themselves. They're catching up on work because they need to get their work done. I'm blaming meetings. I'm blaming our organizational culture on how email, like digital communication and meetings, are getting handled. We've seen a huge spike in the number of meetings that people are having. And 2/3, by the way, this is COVID data, 2/3 of meetings are anonymously rated as being not a good use of their time.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.